Please, I can't wait.
So I was born in Zimbabwe in 1949, and my dad was developing an industry there. And he had a driver, Thomas Taravinga. And I was always in Thomas's company. I remember that. And Thomas had this biggest smile, those beautiful Zimbabwe teeth, perfect white teeth.
Right.
And he was always smiling. And I'm sure the reason I smiled is because he smiled. And whenever I had free time, I was with him. And so I remember him bringing me up.
Wow.
Now, despite my dad being frankly racist, and I mean but that was the culture. And you know, I'm reading a book on genetics of race, and it's so complex because the people who were trying to do the genetics, that is anthropology, they were trying to prove that Bushmen were inferior to white people. That was the science in those days. And these are people alive in 1940, 1930. You know, and so that was the culture. So anyway, when my father died, Thomas' son wrote to me and he said, I want to thank you for what your dad did for me. And I said, what did he do? He said, your father paid my father enough money that I could go to Germany and study as an engineer. And I said, you'll never know what your father did for me. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you didn't even know that your father had done this?
No, well, you know, I didn't know that. And I know my dad helped a lot of people.
Good.
So I could, you know, it would be expected.
I think what happens with racism or a white perspective is when they get to know individuals, something changes in their soul.
Exactly.
But out there, when they're thinking of crime and problems, they have this general concept of how people are.
You see, but my fortune was that I went to a university where I met highly qualified black people, and then how can you generalize when you meet these people?
You cannot.
And Martin Luther King was one of my heroes too, because he was also murdered at the time that I was in America. But also, I was rewarded at my high school because I was the only white guy who would dance with a black kid. Black girl.
Really?
Black so they'd never seen that. They'd never seen that at the school. And we were taken out to dinner for doing it. I thought it was natural. What's wrong? You know?
What's wrong?
She was a lovely girl. She was one of our classmates. She was a super girl. Yeah.
Right?
So, yeah, and the guy who took us out to dinner was the Mexican-American teacher. I forget what he taught. I think he taught Spanish, yeah. And
I think that experience maybe subconsciously had just completely changed everything.
Completely changed because you're quite right, it's subconscious. Because I came into back to South Africa, I still had those views that my parents that I'd generated by my father, but they were getting chipped away. And it takes a long time.
It takes a long time.
It takes a generation.
Everybody's affected by it because even when I'm here, now that I'm here, I'm listening to everybody's stories.
Yeah.
And you do hear one group talk about another group, talk about another group. So it's an institution.
No, absolutely it is. Absolutely. We're still isolated.
Very isolated.
We still live in isolated communities.
And I think that's the whole thing when it comes down to nutrition is just that the isolation, and then people believe what they're taught. And they just subscribe to this, this ideology or this kind of like you're this, and so then you portray what you feel you are, which is why I feel so fortunate. I mean, my mother's from the Deep South and then moved out to Los Angeles, and I was born in Compton, but at that time it was more.
Compton is near Huntington Park. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
it is.
But at that time in the '60s, like you said, you had everything there. It wasn't just a black community or a Mexican community at that time. But because she moved away from the South, and I was raised in California, and I was raised around all communities, then it changed my perspective. So when I come here, just listening to apartheid reminds me of the stories that my mother had when she was growing up in the South as a black woman. So it's just very interesting.
Exactly.
And my cousins today, they eat horrifically, and they have a host of illnesses. So when I come, I'm trying to influence them to eat proper food, because you have the same domino effect of eating poor quality food and the illnesses that come with it, with the diabetes. And in the African American community in the U.S., it's massive.
Exactly.
So all this stuff drives me. So it's awesome to hear your story. I'm so excited.